Welcome to December, boys. I'm out here with my pups, Mr. Bog, and it is a cool but going to be absolutely beautiful day. The one cool thing about winter is if you get sunny days like this, it can be absolutely bitter in the morning, but by the afternoon, if you layer right, you're totally comfortable, and dude, those fish really respond to the sun. So what we're gonna do in today's video on the Monster Bass channel is go through some of my top picks, especially for these sunny days when things warm up a little bit, for lures for December to catch you more bass. So hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get to it. So we're gonna go through 3 types of baits, and what I like about this selection is it covers you everything from, we're in the back of a pocket right here, we got a point, and then there's a ditch back there. Covers you from everything from shallow, which is kind of on top of this point, back of the ditch, all the way out to, there's those deeper fish, you know, those winter fish. If you guys enjoy using electronics, there's methods and lures specifically designed to kind of tap into those. So it gives you kind of a wide selection when you have baits that'll travel 1 to 2, 1 to 4 foot, but at the same time you got other stuff that'll cover you in that 15, 20, 25, even 30 feet. And the trick with winter is I really think there's 2 different groups like that. There's a group of fish that like to move up, especially the largemouth, that like to get shallow when they can. One of the most surprising things I found when I moved to Alabama is how shallow, how skinny these fish get in the dead of winter when the sun's out warming up the water. 1, 2 foot. Places you didn't think, or I wouldn't think they would be, because the water's so cold, but they really gravitate towards that warming water. And really down here in the south, these fish, I think all winter, are in kind of a pre-spawn mode. They might get deep. There's definitely a group that moves out, suspends, you know, focuses on kind of that offshore bait ball kind of like shad that's going on. But a lot of these fish, they want to end up where they want to end up in spring, so they're using just more main lake and sort of big lake positions so they can move up, but they're staying shallower. Square bills. I have an absolute ton of them, but I think one of the biggest mistakes people make this time of year is they fish something that looks really cool, kind of like that guy, but it's way too fat. In this colder water, these fish seem to respond to a tighter wobble, kind of that more subtle high-pitched vibration, almost like a lipless crankbait style bait. So what I kind of gravitate towards is what's called a flat-sided crankbait. This is the new Monster Bass. This is the flat line, but you can see those sides are extremely flat. Still a shallow running crankbait, but extremely flat sides, extremely kind of subtle but tight wobble and vibration. One of my other favorites, and this one's been super popular, not the greatest to cast, but definitely a fish catcher, and that's the Berkeley Fritz side. Once again, a flat style crankbait. You'll notice I got like a shad style, and then I got one in orange and red. The one thing we do see this time of year is quite a bit of a variance in watercolor. Today, for instance, we got pretty green water, pretty stained water, so that's when I go towards those brighter colors. And actually, you know, even a white like this, I consider a brighter color. Maybe like a ghost or something is more subtle, but that white, especially with that chartreuse line, shows up really well in this dirty water. So playing with that and then that orange style kind of color, it's a great starter because that orange, brown, red looks like a crawfish. And a lot of winter fisheries, you know, it's either crawfish or it's shad or some kind of like minnow white kind of bait in between. So that's kind of a good, I don't know, a good play for all around. So moving on, I always talk to you guys about having lures tied on that are versatile, that you can fish fast, you can fish slow, you can fish shallow, you can fish deep. And a great example of that is a spinnerbait. A lot of people gravitate towards a chatterbait, but I think this time of year, December, January, a spinnerbait is a much more viable pick than your classic chatterbait. The reason is they seem to respond to those blades, and we actually have another blade bait that we're going to talk about in just a second, but the blades and that mimicking of like a small group of bait fish, also your ability to kind of slow roll this thing, and fish kind of, I don't know, they tend to be around that rock and wood this time of year, and a chatterbait's great. A chatterbait mini actually does better in those types of situations, but a standard chatterbait, it really, like a jackhammer for instance, hangs up a lot on wood, and it's pretty difficult to fish around wood, whereas the spinnerbait, because of the way the arms are set up, it gives you sort of a weedless or a snagless presentation that you can run straight through wood, you can bounce on the rock, you can slow roll this thing. If the fish get kind of active, if they start schooling, which sometimes happens down here in the south in December, you can burn it, you can move it fast because they're not really schooling on top. There's like pods just under the like surface that are kind of schooling, eating bait, chasing that bait up to the top because it's kind of sunning itself. So a spinnerbait's super versatile, and you can fish it through cover, you can slow roll it, you can burn it, you can do a lot of different retrieves. And I always look at it, an A-rig around me catches a lot of fish during the winter, and a spinnerbait's kind of a smaller, more compact, easier to present type A-rig. The other blade bait is a little more kind of sneaky, and I don't think a lot of guys throw it as much, and this is moving more towards deep water. And the blade bait is basically a trap, I would say. I think this is a Mikey Balzz right here, and the blade bait is a trap, but it's all metal. And we talked about early on with that flat side crankbait how vibration is such a key this time of year. Well, the blade bait like this Mikey Balzz is super thin, so the vibration is absolutely tight, and that's really what fish seem to gravitate towards. It's not even so much moving it fast or moving it slow, but the type of vibration that the bait's giving off. And what's really cool about this guy is, once again, I can fish it shallow. I personally like to fish it deep for suspended fish, but you can fish this guy just like a trap. It's set up just like a trap with that kind of belly weight right there, and basically you can throw it out in some of these shallower areas. I've even ripped it around grass in that. It is an open treble hook presentation, so you can snag stuff, but what you can do is you can actually rip it and sort of jig it up and down and create that fluttering motion, which is absolutely killer this time of year. But then you can also take it and go out deep. If you have forward facing, if you have like decent electronics, you can find some of these balls of bait and these bass that are suspended around it, spotted bass, smallmouth, largemouth, and really target them in a very precise manner, almost using this guy like you would like a spoon, where you're kind of pitching it out or making short casts to very specific targets, and then once again using that yo-yo style retrieve, because this bait's only like a ½ ounce, so it doesn't weigh that much, but it's very easy to sink down. There's no bill on this bait, so you can pitch it out, let it get to where you think it should be, and then use that kind of stroking or a very slow rolled style motion, almost fishing it kind of like an underspin or even slow rolling a spinnerbait, but you get a totally different presentation. And the compact size, they pack a lot of metal into a small compact size, so it's very easy to cast. You know, even though this thing looks pretty small, it's like 1.5 inches or so, maybe 1.75 inches, it's very easy to cast on bait casting tackle, you know, 15-pound fluorocarbon, things along those lines, and then just kind of stroke along, be very precise with it. Now, the one kind of crossover bait that you see a lot this time of year, and it's absolutely killer, and you can probably see why I have a whole freaking box of them, is jerk baits. And jerk baits are kind of interesting because we talked about having something that runs shallow and deep. The funny thing that we're learning about jerk baits, especially with forward-facing sonar, is you might be fishing a shallow jerk bait, but you might be fishing that shallow jerk bait out over 20 feet. And say you have like very clear water, it's amazing how far these fish will come from to actually eat that jerk bait. One of my favorites this time of year is a Vision 110. It's probably like the most expensive jerk bait to ever jerk bait the earth, but it does catch them, and it has this super subtle kind of vibration to it and twitch. It kind of sits like that when it's like sitting in the water when you stall it, but it suspends really well in this cold water, has a very even keel to it. It just has that darting action, and as I said, these fish come from afar to fish it. So like I said, we're in a little pocket. It's probably 4 to 8 feet deep, kind of off this point, and then going into the pocket. This bait only runs maybe like 2 to 4 feet, but I can efficiently fish it in those depths because if the water's clear enough, those fish will come from 10, 20, 30 feet away to actually chase it. I've seen it on my forward facing, and especially in winter, these fish seem to rise more to come to baits to eat them, especially when the weather's nice, the sun's warming kind of the surface, versus you going down on the bottom with, say, like a worm, a jig, things along those lines, and just trying to kind of get them to go down and trail it. A lot of these fish are suspended for the winter. For some reason, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the water temp, maybe it's the bait, but you see them where they're 5, 10, 6, 7 foot off the bottom, so they're kind of in that middle column, and I oftentimes find that getting them to go down is harder than getting them to go up. The other thing that you can do too is there's a lot of variations in jerkbaits. With the popularity of jerkbaits with forward facing, you can get a lot of different types. So I always try to have a shallow jerkbait, Berkeley Stunner, something like that, but then I also try to have something that runs a little bit deeper. That's a Vision 110. I think that's a +2 right there. So this thing will run like 8 foot, 9 foot. So you can get down to some of those deeper fish. Basically what you need to kind of figure out is how far away from them do you need to be to get them to engage. Forward facing helps a ton, but at the same time you can just judge it based upon bites. Throw that shallow one for a bit, 12-pound fluorocarbon, little 7 foot and change medium action bait caster. You can slang it pretty good. Just be careful if it's your first time throwing a jerk bait. They do kind of like spin out and slice out, and you can really like have a terrible freaking bird's nest, dude. So kind of tighten your bait caster down for some of your first casts, especially in winter, because you can have frozen line, which is a total headache. But really judge based upon the clarity of your water. The darker the water, the more stained the water, the brighter the jerk bait you'll need to use, and also the closer to those fish you'll need to get, so you'll need to get a little bit deeper. If you're on gin clear water, which we may run to, we're on Smith Lake right now, we may run down towards the dam where the water is gin clear, like up north, 10 foot, 15 foot visibility. If we get into that situation, these fish will come from afar to go and smack that jerk bait, so you don't have to get so far down to them. You can kind of keep it over the top, twitch them, tease them, and bring them up and have them smash that bait. Those are my December lure picks, and I'll always say, there is no perfect lure. That's the general arsenal I go out with. It gives me the opportunity to cover some of those shallow water fish, gives me the opportunity to cover some of those deep water fish, and then everything in between. Obviously I make changes, variations in between. Maybe I'll tie on a lipless, maybe I'll tie on that jig if I can't get any bites with these suspending or staying over the top of them reaction style lures. As always, fishing is adaptation, it's recognizing kind of the situation in front of you, but that's a good arsenal to get started with, especially if you have a varying watercolor between dingy and clear, and especially if you have varying like weather temps or varying kind of situations between shallow and deeper fish. It allows you to cover just about anything, and I know they bite those lures because I catch them on it in December. But I hope you guys enjoy this. Hit that like and subscribe button. Get out there, smash some winter fish, because one other quick thing, they are big this time of year, dude. A lot of our giants get caught between, say, December and January. It's sort of like that pre-spawn. Some of the biggest fish in the lake tend to spawn the earliest. That means they're in that pre-spawn mode the earliest, and that means they are catchable when they are absolutely fat, and that's when we love to catch them. Hope you guys enjoy this. I'm going to go out with Bog, and we are going to attempt to catch a few fish, but we will see you back out on the water, talking fishing, talking baits, talking lures. Later, boys.